Hi everybody, welcome back to part 28 of the Trumpeter 1/200 scale Bismarck build. This time I've had a bit of a change of plan. After last week when I built the secondary armament, I was going to move on this week and build the main turrets, but I've had a bit of a change of heart and I wanted to see how the main mast went together. There's quite a lot of turned brass and photo etch to put together this week. So I wanted to see how all that came together. It completely replaces the Trumpeter plastic mast and it's a lot more detailed. So I'll show you how that goes together. We'll get over to the bench and make a start this week. Okay, so let's make a start this week with the main mast. A couple of sections for the main mast. We've got this one here, which is the base, which goes up to the lookout position, and then the upper part with the various yards and so on it, which will come together at the end here to form the whole mast. So quite an involved assembly. It's going to take quite a while to get this done. Completely replaces the Trumpeter plastic, as did the foremast that we did a couple of weeks ago. So the first step is to get this base done, get the turned brass out and the photo etch that we need, and let's make a start. So this is the lookout, and it's quite a substantial piece of brass folded up into a open box. Glue's not going to work on that. It'll be very difficult to get that to go together. So what I'm going to do instead is solder this. We have a floor to go inside as well, which is slightly tricky. So in order to get that in, what I'm going to do is just solder two ends up, slide the floor in, and then close the final wall up, if you like. And hopefully that'll all hold together. So we've got some flux on the join on the inside, and a small little clipping of solder. So with those three sides of the box formed, I can try and get the floor in now. There are some little tabs on the inside face that locates the floor in the correct position. And again, I'm just going to solder that along the sides. So just give this a clean up now. We need to get rid of all that flux that's left over. If we don't, that'll prevent the paint from sticking to the inside of the lookout. I also give this a spray with some cellulose through the airbrush as well, just to degrease it. So now I've fitted the upper part of the mast in place, and this goes through the lookout and locks onto the lower mast. So it's quite a substantial structure, and it traps the lookout in the correct position. The only thing to be careful of here is that there's a slot cut out in the turning, and that's to accept the upper mast here, like that. The next substantial assembly is a frame which fits round about this position here and carries some spars on the back of it. So I'll get that on next. That's this piece of photo etch which requires folding. The one thing I don't like about soldering is that your hands get so grubby. So just some simple folds there to create basically a tray. There are some eyelets which need to come up. So that'll slide down in that sort of position. But again, as I pointed out when we built the foremast, you do have to be careful with these because there are some rings that need to go down before other ones do. The mast is slightly tapered and those rings need to be put in position in sequence, otherwise you won't get them on. So this is the first of them. This has got some eyelets on for rigging, and they go fore and aft. I think this one actually should have gone up from underneath, and I found that difficult to get down from the top. So a little cheat if you do run into that problem, because there's no indication in the Pontos instructions which sequence to fit them in. I just made a tiny snip in the ring and it just allowed it to go down from the top rather than up from the bottom. And if you're careful with the cut, it doesn't show at all. So that's a bit of a rescue job. This is extra thin or super thin C8. And the one thing to be careful with in using it is not to flood the rigging holes. Otherwise you're going to run into all sorts of frustrations later on. What I'm doing here is just fitting these parts and then crossing them off on the Pontos instructions just to make sure that I get everything. So I think I'm in a position to fit this top piece. Just square that up. Now at this stage again I'm going to take a chance and glue the top part of the mast in place. I hope that's not a mistake because I won't be able to get that out again. The next big section to work out is this piece here, this frame, and this fits onto the aft side of this platform at an angle up like that, and we've got some folds to make on it as well. I'll break out the long pliers for this. So to attach this frame we need the support of this brace. So the two need to be fitted together to make sure we get the right angle. The brace also accepts this upper yard arm, just make sure that that's going to go in. Okay, let's attempt to get this on then. That's quite a positive location, so that should be okay. I think the best thing to do here is to glue the brace first. Just square everything up before I give it any glue. And now I'll get the frame on. Okay, so that's gone on. Okay, it's nice and firm. Put that yard on now. Pontos give us a little mark in the centre of the yard just to make sure that we get it positioned properly. These next parts are the gaffs for the battle ensign, and we need to do two joins with this. So we fold the bracket to start with, and then the pins that are formed by the photo etch, the gaffs slide onto the end, the hollowed out. So we end up with that kind of a staggered arrangement. This centre hole takes one of the yards, the second yard, the larger yard. So that's all glued together. There's no need to glue the centre folded piece of photo etch. The yards or the gaffs hold them in place. So now I just need to figure out how this goes into position on the mast. There is a little bracket under here which I missed. So we'll fold that up. You can just get to it. And that will pin in there like that. And the yard will go across the back of the frame and through this loop and lock it into position. I think the easiest way to do this will be to just tack the yard onto its frame. And then manoeuvre the gaff if I can. So that didn't work just because of the geometry, so the next thing is to try to link the gaff onto the yard. Anyone fancy climbing up that? I don't think I would. I'm going to work up the top mast now, starting with this yard which goes round about that position. Again, just centre the yard using the little mark. You're not going to be able to see it on camera, but there's a tiny little scribe on the yard that tells us where the centre is. Now this is one of those yards that has these lifts, and we have to fit them around the end of the yard first before we attach it to the mast. These parts are lamps for the top mast, and we've got to fit them into this little bracket here. This is a part that I'm going to get a close-up for you, because you're not going to be able to see this on the video camera. The pins on these lamps are just a little bit too long, so I'll just trim them back a bit. Now this is one area where Pontos are helpful, that they give us an order to fit these parts. There is an aerial to fit right at the top of this mast, but I'm not going to do that just yet. This all needs rigging, so I don't want to be adding very fine aerial masts on the top there. So that's as much as I'm going to do on the top mast. We've got some detail to fit further down the mast, which I'll do, get some ladders on, but we're nearly there with this one. Okay, so as you can see, I've pressed on with the rest of the detailing on this mast, and I've added most of the ladders, which go all the way right up to the top where the lamps are, and there's an aerial to go on the top here as well. The only thing that I've omitted is this lower ladder, which Pontos tell us to fit on this aft side here. But when I test fitted the mast onto the model, that obstructs against the signals platform. So I just need to check my references to see how the mast was accessed from the signals platform itself. So I'm just going to leave that off for the moment. And the other thing is I'm going to leave it in this raw unpainted state, because there's a lot of thought process to go on to work out whether or not I can add any of the rig to the mast at this stage before it goes onto the model. So I'll leave it there for this week. I'll go over to the ship and we'll have a look at the mast actually dry fitted onto the ship in this condition, and give some thought to where we go next. Okay, so as you can see, I've just temporarily fitted the mast onto the hull. I've not painted it yet, and that's because I just need to give some thought to how I go about doing the rig. It might be that I can do some of the rigging with the mast off the ship and then fit it and do the rest afterwards. But whatever I do, I'm going to have to give it some serious thought. I don't want to cause problems for myself by getting out of step, if you like. So because of that, I'm not absolutely sure where I'm going to go next with the model. It may be that I just carry on and do some rest of the detailing on the superstructure whilst I think through how I'm going to deal with the rig. It's a lot more complicated, a rig on the Bismarck, than it was on the hood, and that was complicated enough. But wherever I decide to go next, I'll bring you the progress in part 29, which will be as usual next Friday night at 8 o'clock. So hopefully you'll be able to join me for that. In the meantime, everybody, look after yourselves, and I'll see you in another few days. Bye for now.